Hi everyone, my name is Hannah Timms, and for Educational Psychology, this is my presentation for success tips for beginning educators. And while any educator can use the tips I will be talking about, I did focus more on the speech pathology aspect because that is the field of education I want to be in. So before we jump into things, I just wanted to give a little overview of the presentation. So first we're going to talk about some theories of education, and then we're going to get into our tips and some speech pathology applications of those tips. Then I'm going to talk about how I plan to use these tips in my own classroom. And then I'm going to do a little summary and encouragement and then just show my references. The two theories that I focused on in my field experiences were the social cognitive theory and Vygotsky's theory of learning, which emphasizes the zone of proximal development. So, the social cognitive theory considers the unique way in which individuals acquire and maintain behavior while also considering the social environment in which individuals perform the behavior. So, an important aspect of the social cognitive theory is observational learning. So, this is when learning occurs through observations. You observe someone's behavior and then you decide if you want to copy that behavior or not to copy that behavior and see what kind of reward you get in the end. And another huge aspect of this theory was self efficacy, which is the belief in oneself to succeed. And so the other theory, Vygotsky's, focused on how a child's thinking is influenced by relationships with others who are more capable, knowledgeable, or expert than the learner. So he believed that students learning a new skill will perform better with someone who is an expert at the skill. The zone of proximal development is the difference between what a learner can achieve independently and what a learner can achieve with guidance from someone more knowledgeable. Through this theory, we can conclude that learning takes place through social processes. So I'm going to be completely honest. In my field experiences, I was able to see the social cognitive theory throughout. But with Vygotsky's, I really did not get any proof that it works or it doesn't work. So for this presentation, I will be focusing on the social cognitive theory, but I did just want to add Vygotsky's because I did focus on that in one of my field experiences. So tip number 1, get to know your students. And I know this sounds like a pretty self-explanatory tip, but really I wanted to emphasize the importance of this. You need to get to know every student on a deeper level, and by getting to know them, you establish a connection with them and a mutual trust that you're not going to do anything to hurt them. You want to be there for them, and they can confide in you. And by that trust and connection, you can really understand their needs, which could be anything like behavior needs, I don't know, home needs, learning needs. You just establish that trust and connection that you both need to have in order to facilitate their learning. The speech pathology application of the tip getting to know your students is establishing a caring relationship with them, just like I've said. You will be either in group therapy or one-on-one with these students. So you want to have that relationship so that you can help them. And another big thing would be to build rapport with not only the student, but also their family. You want to have that connection because therapy, it helps in the school, don't get me wrong, but you also need the family to help with the therapy and know how to help their child. And so this is really where patient and family-centered care comes from. So, you're not just focused on the client, but you're also focused on the family and the people around them, which, if your client is a student or a child, they're going to be around their family 24/7. So having, that centered care can really help not only the family and the therapy, but the child so much. And I also wanted to say, a little quote from Charles Van Riper, which is a founding father of speech pathology, is, "It is not enough to know the kind of disorder a person has. One must know the kind of person who has the disorder, which I think is so important to remember. On to tip number 2, establish clear expectations. So by setting clear expectations, you're able to set rules for all students that they have to follow. And by setting these rules, you're able to create routines that they can follow in every day. You give them a sense of normalcy. And during these rules and expectations, you need to provide feedback. Now, this feedback could be positive or constructive feedback. They just need to know that you're actually going to enforce these rules and expectations. I was interviewing a woman who was a parapro and a substitute, and now she's a media specialist. So she's been around the school, so she's able to see all these different rules. And she says, even in the library, you need to have clear rules and expectations that all students know, and they know the rules are going to be enforced, so they need to follow them. And she said, even in the classroom, same thing. You need to have your rules laid out on the first day of class or school so that they are aware of those and it is very clear. The speech pathology application of rule number 2, which talks about expectations, would be before therapy begins, lay out the whole session plan for the client. You don't want the student or the client to be surprised of anything you're doing, because that's going to shut them down during therapy and you're not going to be able to get the work done. And so give clear explanations of goals and expectations for the session. So, lay it all out there. Make sure they know what they need to be working on and that you have expectations of them. While most people think, speech therapy is just fun, we have expectations and goals we are trying to reach for that student. So it's important for them to know that they are expected to do the work. And one more little tip is set timers and give warnings when transitionings are going to happen from activities. I think it's very important to have smooth transitions. And when having smooth transitions, you need to let them know, 5 minutes before speech is over, or if you work these 5 minutes, we'll be able to play a little game at the end of therapy. And when I was also interviewing the same lady who is now a media specialist, but was a parapro. She said it's very important to give a lot of warnings to students. You need to let them know 10 minutes, 5 minutes before transitioning, and you need to transition very quickly so no one can get off task, and so you can go from one activity to the next. Tip number 3, create a positive learning environment. As educators, we want to make learning fun and accessible for everyone. So if students are having challenges in math or reading or really anything academics-wise, we want to make learning fun. So by creating fun games, fun assignments to help them learn and really motivate them. So motivation is very important for students. As educators, we want to motivate our students to keep learning, to have fun learning, and really show them that we want them to succeed. So this is really where the social cognitive theory comes into place, just self-efficacy and observational learning. We want to promote that. We want to be here. We want to learn with them and have a good attitude and really help them improve their self-efficacy and believe in themselves that they can do it. So the speech pathology application for a positive learning environment would be to make therapy fun and create a space that is inviting for students and where you can facilitate learning in therapy. And so by having that positive learning environment, you are helping motivate students to reach their goals, not only academically, but also their speech-related goals. And another aspect of a positive learning environment could be child-led therapy. So SLPs use the child's interest, choices, and intrinsic motivation as the foundation for intervention. So the child is able to lead therapy through their own motivation. As we know, the social cognitive theory, focuses on intrinsic motivation, which is self-motivation. So getting personal satisfaction from doing something rather than receiving a reward. So that is very important when you have your own motivation to reach your goals. Another aspect of a positive learning environment, like I said before, was creating a welcoming space for everyone. So this could also mean implementing different technology like AAC devices. It's important to know the needs of the child, as we have said before. So implementing different technology and creating individualized therapy for every child is very important to create that positive learning environment. Tip number 4, have the ability to pivot or change plans at a moment's notice. In simple terms, be flexible. Don't get flustered when things don't work out perfectly, because they're not always going to be perfect. And always have a backup plan. I think this is important for every educator to know, because things are not always going to be what you have laid out. Of course, you made a lesson plan or a therapy plan in step by step, but that's not always going to be tangible. So you need to be able to be flexible and have another plan. The speech pathology application of tip number 4. I think it is important to acknowledge when therapy is not going in the direction you want it to go. So then you're able to pivot to something else. And so you could change the therapy approach. And I also think you could use your active listening skills to maybe let the child lead the therapy session, as we have talked about before. And so it is really important for not only educators to be able to pivot, but also speech pathologists, because your therapy session is not always going to go how you think it's going to go. And I was interviewing, actually for my second field experience, a master's student in speech pathology who just finished an externship at a pediatric clinic, who said she was really able to observe her supervisor have that ability to pivot and be flexible during every therapy session. If therapy wasn't going in the right way, she would change it. She would use a tablet. She would go to the board. She just made it fun and was able to think on her feet. So I think that is important for educators to know. So how I will use this knowledge to enhance my own educational practice. So I actually plan to implement these tips in my own classroom. I want to help my students and create a positive learning environment. So I think these tips are very beneficial for beginning educators, because it's kind of just like a blueprint. Of course, you're going to make your own tips and tricks when you actually get in the classroom, but I think this is a good basic knowledge level to have. A little summary and encouragement. So, because of educational psychology, I have a better understanding of how learning actually occurs. I now have more tools and understanding on how to help my future students and facilitate learning even more for them. And I encourage you to try these tips in your own classroom and see if they work for you. These are the references that I have used. Thank you so much for listening.